There are a number of skills to work things out in families. We have gone to the literature and identified the strongest, most powerful skills that can be translated to various different families. What's nice about these skills is that these are a set of principles. These skills are a way of trying to accomplish something, much like the goals of FFT. The exact way that they're said, the exact way that you implement them, probably depends more upon matching to the family than it does around a right way to do them. 4 skills, and these can all help work things out in daily interactions. Alliance-based problem solving, reciprocal communication, collaborative conflict management, and then parents who monitor, supervise, and support for success based upon the developmental status of the family. In the room, behavior change is just as dynamic as the engagement and motivation phase. It again is not a curriculum in which you teach. It's an active, dynamic discussion in which you put new ideas in and ask through coaching, teaching, structuring. You ask family members to actually do something different. Now again, remember what we talked about earlier. Interventions are purposeful activities to accomplish a goal. The end point here is not the intervention. The end point here is whether or not the family can use the skill within the sequence and keep that up. Here's how it actually works in the room. First step, identify the skill. Now in a minute, we're going to talk about a priority of skills in terms of how you might normally approach which skill to do first. But the first step becomes, what is it? What is the activity or the skill, and where in the sequence do you think it will go so that it will be relevant and make a difference? Number 2, identify an important issue that's an issue for the family at the current moment, something that they're struggling with or debating. In a prompted discussion about that issue, demonstrate, coach, and practice, interrupt them, and put a new skill and ask each person to do the reciprocal parts of the skill as they do the discussion. Along the way, adjust the language and the words, adjust the pacing so that it fits them better. Identify a skill, identify an issue. Demonstrate, coach, and practice in the discussion, and adjust along the way. Now here is the real trick. It is unlikely that you will do all the skills. It is more likely that you will do 1 or 2 and combine them into one major behavior change plan that you'll use with the family. So what ends up happening is after you go through this cycle, it is not that you do a new skill. It is more that you continue to adjust and adapt the skill over time. All skills are not equal in the sense of what feels relevant to the family. For example, if you have a drug-using adolescent and you come to the family and talk about better communication skills, it's frequently difficult for the caregivers in that family to see directly how communication will change the behavior that worries and scares them so much. As a result, our experience suggests that prioritizing skills around relevance makes it fit the family better, makes the family engage better, and be more motivated in their desire to take part. So think about how this could go. First of all, we would suggest to you that alliance-based problem solving, or let's work it out, becomes the primary skill to focus on. Then the question becomes this. The question becomes, of the other skills, collaborative conflict management, communication, alliance-based parenting, where you're parenting for success and supervising for success, the question is, in this unique setting, with this unique family, what amount of each of those might you need to be able to support alliance-based problem solving? Here's what I mean by that. It's clear that communication is really important in problem solving, but to a different degree for different families in different settings. Let me give you an example. Maybe that in working with a family, and you're trying to work with alliance-based problem solving, a little bit of helping the parents come to an alliance-based position of coaching and teaching, equal amount of communication, and equal amount of conflict management when they get stuck in the cycle. It could very well be that in a different family, there's a different ordering or a different prioritizing and weighting of skills that fits that family better. So for example, the task and the primary objective still may be working things out. But in the second family, it may be that it's much more about helping the parents come to a position of feeling like they can be most helpful if they're coaches and teachers, Communication in this particular family might be far less important, and conflict management might be a bit bigger. In a third family, it may look even different, with communication being the primary feature that impacts the ability to do alliance-based problem solving when the other two are less. Notice, this is about you adjusting along the way. This is not about having a single way in which you do each of the skills. Now, there's a way to prioritize behavior change skills along the way in the discussion with the family, because it can be very difficult to tease out, for example, the difference between negotiating and problem solving. So let us give you a bit of a hint. First of all, when there's ongoing fighting in the sequence, pick problem solving. So start with problem solving and add conflict management and emotional regulation if you need. Add communication after that. So when there's fighting that's involved, you tend to lean towards working something out and a little less, and managing the conflict and a little less communication. When there's no talking about an issue that needs to be talked about, we typically suggest that you move towards picking negotiation and then add good communication to develop impact statements and other ways of people sharing what their reactions to different things are. When there's lecturing and no clear point and no clear response, things just go around and around, maybe that you want to help the family by focusing on communication, by helping them use I messages or impact statements so that they're able to just share what they struggle with, rather than mixing that with requests for change. Notice with each of these, you go in with an idea, you're confronted with a challenge, and you adjust the skill and the combination of skills to fit that challenge. Let's take a look at each of the skills in detail for a moment in terms of how you might do them. And this is, again, in the best case. Remember, it's important to know that it's probably unlikely for you to ever do completely these in exactly this order. It's important that you're dynamic and that you make the principle of this fit. The core skill is alliance-based problem solving, of course. And alliance-based problem solving is a method for adolescents and children, depending on how young, to work things out together. Now, again, for an adolescent, this becomes incredibly important because it fits their developmental level. For a younger child, it becomes important because it involves them in parenting decisions. It also helps to get the parent to pay attention to the needs and the desires of the youth by having them focus on problem solving. There's a couple steps. First of all, clearly, what's the problem? What are we going to talk about here? And identifying the problem is remarkably difficult because, as we talked about with problem definitions, it's not unlikely that people in the family will have different ideas about what the matter is. By identifying the problem and spending time going round and around to make sure it's clear before you move on, what you've done is, again, help get people on the same page. Number two, what do you want to have happen as a result of the discussion about this? What's the outcome you're looking for? Clarifying that outcome does two things. First of all, it gives you a common goal, but secondly, it also additionally helps clarify the problem. Agree on what it takes to do it. What are the steps you're going to have to do to get there? What are the steps I'm going to have to do? How can we hold each other accountable? Do we need, for example, to write it down? Do we need to put it into a contract, or can we have a verbal agreement? Before you're done, go to the difficult place. Once there's an agreement, and do this after there's agreement, come and say, now let's do the hard part. Let's talk about all the things that each of you might do, inadvertently, of course, that may make this go bad. 5. Set a time to come back and see if it worked. And again, what's important is to close the loop here and come full circle and come back to the table and say, did it or didn't it work? Two things can happen then. One thing that happens is you get additional ideas about how to make it work better the next time. The other is you build hope and encouragement and motivation by identifying when something was successful. Better to identify it after they've worked on it and have something to feel successful about. Alliance-based problem solving. It's a two-sided process between people about an issue that's relevant in the moment for the family. The other half of problem solving is negotiating. Negotiating focuses on things that will come up and on making agreements about how one might manage those. That might make an agreement upon when one might do a chore. It might be an agreement on when one might come home, when one might do homework. The agreement could be about a wide variety of things, not just about children, not just about youth, but also about parents. also between parents. So the difference between problem solving and negotiating is negotiating looks to the future to something. Problem solving looks to fix something that occurred by coming up with a new behavior. First issue with negotiating is, first of all, decide if you can compromise. You don't want to create more negativity and blame by trying to compromise about something it can't be. So you have to determine the degree to which they are in their corners and they're in their camps, and the degree to which you can use reframing and family themes to bring them out. Negotiate one thing at a time, and as you negotiate, be very clear about it. One of the things, for example, that will come up will always be, well, we can do that if you will. What's important to do is separate that out as a second issue, not as part of the first. Go back and forth with alternative proposals. This should be dynamic. This should involve ideas from both sides and open responses to those ideas from everybody. So as you go back and forth in the family, it's good to help them with the communication skill of just acknowledging a new idea rather than saying that won't work. Repeat the outcome, identify what can go wrong, and again, just like with problem solving, come back and see if the goal was met. We all know that one of the core things that helps either negotiating or problem solving is communicating. Communicating is a very complicated, multi-layered process. It has to do with giving information, but it's two-sided. It has to do with receiving information. Let's go through the reciprocal steps of communicating. Now, on the side of the giving of information, whether it's asking for something to be different or just giving an impact statement, which is my idea and my feelings about something that occurred, these features help. First, own it. I feel, I know, I think, I want. Owning with source responsibility is really critically important. Be direct. This is the thing that I'm looking for. This is the thing I want to say. Be brief. 4, 5, 6 times of repeating things just doesn't help. Be concrete and specific. What exactly is it that you want? Specifically when, where, how? Exactly what you feel. Be congruent. If this is serious, look serious. If it's not serious, then don't look so serious. Make it fit so that you don't mix the communication with messages that get lost. When you want something to change, use problem solving as a communication tool. When you want to tell someone how you've experienced something that they did or something that else did, be very clear. I just want to let you know how this impacts me. It is called an impact statement. It doesn't require a response, except a listening response. 7 things that make communication very easy. And it isn't that in any communication, any of these is wrong or right. The question is whether any of these features get in the way of the message being clearly understood by the other person. Now, on the other side of the reciprocal part of communication is a response. Similar principles of good communication, but this is the way in which when the communicator communicates, these are responses that help. First of all, active listening, paying attention, responding to some things, showing the other person that indeed you are listening. Being brief in your responses. Don't take away the discussion. Don't take away the podium. Don't take away the microphone. Let them speak, but just be brief in anything you have to say in response. What you should say in response, or what the other person should say, is a conveying of an understanding of what was said. This is not the time to disagree. This is a response to show you understood. Use problem solving and alternatives to disagree. And these go back and forth. And when you have both sides together, someone speaking, paying attention to these 7 issues, and someone responding, paying attention to these 4. Whether you're talking about a daily activity, whether you're recounting a past experience, whether you're talking about something in the future, or problem solving or negotiating, these types of communication between people in a reciprocal manner are what makes that process go better and help reduce and create openness within a family. The reason that clients come to us and families come to us is because they've struggled. So many of the times, the things that they talk about are things that have a great deal of emotion connected with them. That's in large part because of what we talked about earlier, which is that problems that families experience don't start when they come to see us. They've been around. And so when you begin to talk about them, there is a great deal of emotion. There's a great deal of things that happen very quickly. It's hard to understand why it occurs. Many of those activities, with good communication, with problem solving, they can be worked out. Some of those reactions cannot be worked out, and some of them need to be just contained, and the conflict needs to be managed. There are problems that get in the way of working things out that are best solved by trying to manage them and move around them so that the problem solving, so that the negotiating can go on unobstructed. Couple principles to this. First thing is you can avoid it. There's some early triggers that happen in these sequences that get one ready to have a conflict, and you can just stay away from those. Prevent conflict. Use a transition for timeouts. And what I mean by that is if you look at a way a family has a conflict, and conflicts frequently happen not because of the content, but because of the timing. So for example, it might be right after work when a caretaker's coming home and they're bombarded by their 4 children with different requests. That's a point in which conflict can occur. And it's a superhuman request to ask a caretaker not to be overburdened and frustrated. But what one could do is avoid the conflict by having time out, by taking some time as you walk in the door, for example. All transitions have the possibility of having conflict connected to them because they change the pattern. And they're not understandable sometimes to the other person, meaning that sometimes when there's great pressure, it's important to prevent it because you don't see it coming. The third option is to contain it. What I mean by contain it is not let the conflict overcome everything else, change the climate of the family, and completely derail the attempts at problem solving. So to contain it, you need to do a number of things. Take a break, think it through, come back. Those are the steps. Take a break, think it through, and come back. All 3 are important. Here are the kinds of things that we frequently ask people to think about to help manage the conflict and to help manage and regulate the emotions that they have. Learning exactly what the issue for them is. Thinking about what would satisfy them. Thinking about if that's important enough for them. If they've tried to get it through some of the other means like problem solving. How much conflict that they're willing to go through. So avoiding, preventing, and containing are all the features that become important in helping a family not get stuck in the sequence as they're trying to work things out. And remember, it is a 2-sided process. So what that means is that if a break is taken by a caregiver, a youth needs to respect that. And if a caretaker takes a break, they are responsible for coming back and closing the circle. The 4th area has mostly to do with caregivers, but it also has to do with the climate that exists in a family. Caregivers have a particular role. They have a role of teaching. They have a role of educating. They have a role of protecting. They have a role of supporting and facilitating the growth of their children. That role changes depending on where in the family life cycle they are, but the goal and the role remains the same. At the same time, they're adults with tasks and responsibilities in the world, and they have a lot on their shoulders frequently. Helping parents bring an alliance-based, supportive side to their parenting, monitoring, and supervising is what the last area is about. This notion of how one approaches one's caregiver activities has everything to do with creating a particular climate in the family. If the climate in the family is one in which the caregiver is going to control to manage, that's going to make it very difficult for the youth, the children, and create and likely set up future conflicts. If, on the other hand, the caregiver can have a climate in the family by them taking a role which focuses on monitoring, supervising, and supporting, teaching and coaching and helping, where they see their role as facilitating the positive development of their youth, that changes parenting. That changes the parenting role, and that also changes dramatically the climate in the family. Our way of thinking about this is to suggest to parents that the position for them to embrace is that their role is to monitor, supervise, and teach for success. What that means is young children need different features to succeed. They need to have clear messages about what to do. They need to have consistent reinforcements, consistent constructive criticism. They need to be guided in a collaborative alliance-based way. We've already talked about that with adolescents, they need a voice in problem solving and in negotiation so they feel part of things. In all of those cases, the caregiver needed to change the role that they play based upon the different development of their youth. That means that parenting does not stay static, but the enormously large challenge for a caregiver is for them to change with the developmental cycle of the youth. What we're suggesting here is that their supervision is a supervision that focuses on guiding and teaching, whether it's a child or whether it's a youth. Because the opportunity with a child is to help raise them in a way in which they're an active participant that feels responsibility for the outcomes in the family. That comes through when they're a child, teaching them and supervising and guiding. Parenting works best when it's alliance-based, when the focus of the parent, regardless of the developmental strategy or the developmental status, is working together. Now again, working together with young children is different than working together with adolescents or adults. Each takes a different variation and a different use of the same skills. But at the end of the day, alliance-based parenting is about supporting through guiding and teaching and helping, looking to work together, and looking to build a climate within the family of help, support, teaching, responsibility, and then reciprocal investment and engagement in the family's future. In the behavior change phase, the sessions are going to be structured much like they were in engagement and motivation. They typically will start at twice a week at the beginning, but frequency will be based upon risk, remember. The higher risk families you will see more often. However, in behavior change, you want to begin to titrate the sessions so that the family increasingly does more and more on their own so that they can gain a sense of competency. Typical sessions in behavior change are conducted with all the key members of the family. Sessions take an hour to an hour and a half, but they have a specific purpose that you work out based upon your progress note. And families have 6 to 8 sessions in behavior change, depending, where they focus not on every one of the skills, but the core skills that fit their context. And the phase lasts until they demonstrate they can do the skill. That's why it's important not to bombard them with too many, but do more with less and focus on a set of skills that's most relevant to them